I want to get back firstly to our national self-harm when it comes to electricity supplies and prices, of course. I said from the start, of course, that Labor could never deliver on their promise to bring power bills down by $275. We said that when they promised it during the election campaign, and it's all coming to fruition now. The chickens are coming home to roost, and that's where I started with Nationals MP and former Resources Minister Keith Pitt.
Well, prices keep going up, along with taxpayer-funded subsidies. Today's announcement of some 20% plus, that's just the tip of the iceberg. It's been going up for more than a year. Brisbane alone up 32% in the March quarter. And somehow we're going to see magically 28,000 kilometres of transmission, millions of hectares of solar panels and thousands of wind turbines all built before 2030. It's just not happening.
Well, this is the extraordinary thing, right? Labor comes into government promising a lot of relief in a lot of areas, especially on cost of living, but a very clear promise to reduce electricity prices by $275 a year. Now, they say they do that by 2025, but there's no way known they're going to do that because prices have gone up by much more than that already.
Well, if it goes up by $1,500 and then down by $275 by that time period, I don't think anyone's in front. Chris Bowen, he lives in some sort of dreamland. His press conference this morning was basically unhinged, banging on about nuclear and nuclear waste. Well, you're going to have to deal with nuclear waste with the submarine program anyway. So, I mean,
I'll come back to Chris Bowen in a moment. But first, on these prices, the government's argument is if they hadn't stepped in with price caps on coal and gas, the prices would be even higher. And of course, they say we're spending more taxpayers' money paying rebates out to some people. That's not a solution. This is a mess.
Well, Anthony Albanese's popping the champagne corks, Chris. He thinks this is a great result. 20% increase across the board. Massive explosion of intermittent wind and solar, which, guess what, doesn't work when it's dark, doesn't work when it's raining, doesn't work when it's cloudy, doesn't work when there's a monsoon, doesn't work when there's a cyclone. Has to be backed up 100%. None of those things exist yet. And yet somehow he expects the Australian people to believe that he's done them a favour.
Well, this is the problem, right? This is caused by the push to renewables. They keep saying, Labor keeps saying, and other politicians, to be frank, that renewables are the answer. But all the experts, even the experts who believe in the renewables push, they admit that all these price increases are caused by the transition to renewables and the enormous amount of expenditure that's required and the enormous amount of cheap dispatchable energy that's going out of the system. Yet we learned today that the New South Wales Labor government reckons they're $10 billion short on investment in some of this renewables infrastructure. So this is going to get a whole lot worse before it gets better, isn't it?
Well, every single dollar of that has to be paid for. It's got to be paid for by electricity consumers. I saw some of those quotes today. Are they going to put it on the credit card of the power company? Well, guess how that'll get paid for? Through an increase in prices, paid for by consumers and businesses right across New South Wales. I still think they've underestimated it by tens of billions of dollars. It's infrastructure that doesn't exist. And cast your mind back not that far, Chris. Baseload coal-fired power stations. They were absolutely consistent, reliable, cheap, affordable. They worked. What's changed? You've got a federal Labor government and a mad rush into intermittent wind and solar that hasn't worked anywhere else in the world. And yet, by some miracle, they expect it'll work here.
Well, of course, if you want dispatchable, reliable power without carbon dioxide emissions, nuclear is the answer. The technology does exist. Now, your party is starting to go down that road, starting to consider it, and I think you'll go further before the election. But as you mentioned earlier, Chris Bowen is dissing nuclear at every turn. Have a look at this response from him today.
The only thing small about a small modular reactor is the output. Nothing small about the cost, nothing small about the complexity. A small modular reactor costs $5 billion and it doesn't produce many megawatts. $5 billion, that's a lot of billions for not many megawatts.
What a small-minded and short-sighted answer, because I said at the top of the program, if you spent $5 billion on a small modular reactor and you got 1,000 or 2,000 megawatts, it's there for 70 years and it's reliable. Chris Bowen at the moment is backing a project that Malcolm Turnbull started, the Snowy 2.0 project. That's going to cost $20 billion and not produce a single extra generated megawatt.
Well, 1,000 megawatts is not that small. I mean, Liddell was down to 1,350. It was a pretty big power plant. And, you know, if you look at what's in a nuclear sub, I'm told the reactor's about the size of a 44-gallon drum, 205 litres. And it produces megawatts. It creates comfort for your sailors, excess of energy. It works. We're using that technology. It's here. We have to build the industry and capacity. The only thing that has to be decided for a domestic nuclear industry is where do you put them, Chris? And I think that's the question that the coalition has to answer before the next election. It will be the question that gets asked. We've seen Chris Bowen out trying to run his scare campaign already, but his press conference this morning, as I said, unhinged.
Unhinged indeed. It's very easy to work out where to put them. You put them where those old coal-fired generators used to be, because that's an industrial wasteland now, and it's got all the transmission infrastructure linked into it. But we'll come back to that another time, Keith. Thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you.